Welcome to today's video. Hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to support the channel. Notifications. Mike parked the car, carefully turning off the engine while his thoughts still echoed with the weight of the day. He felt the tiredness in his shoulders, but also a slight comfort knowing that in a few minutes he would be home. He took a deep breath, grabbed his briefcase, and walked to the door. Upon opening it, he was met by a silence that seemed too dense to be welcoming. The living room light was on, and Lisa was on the sofa, but something was different. She wasn't watching TV or reading a book as usual. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, her distant gaze revealing some kind of restlessness. Mike set his briefcase down by the door and went over to her. "Hi, honey, everything okay?" His voice was gentle, and he tried to hide the worry that was starting to emerge. Lisa raised her eyes to him and managed a brief smile, but the discomfort on her face was obvious. "Hi, Mike," she replied, almost in a whisper, unsure of what was going on. Mike sat down beside her. The atmosphere in the room felt different, heavy. He knew something important was about to be said, but decided not to push her. He watched as Lisa took a deep breath, her fingers playing with the edges of her dress, a habit she showed only when she was nervous. I've been thinking a lot lately," she began, her voice quiet but serious, "about us, about our marriage, about how we've fallen into a routine." Mike felt a pang of anxiety in his chest, but remained silent, listening carefully. Lisa hesitated for a moment, as if gathering the strength to continue. "Don't get me wrong, I love everything we've built. I love you, I love our life, but I feel like something's missing, as if we're stuck, as if everything's too predictable." He nodded slightly, trying to show he was listening without judgment, but inside his mind was already questioning what she really meant. "I know this might sound strange," Lisa continued, looking at him with hesitation in her eyes, "but while I was thinking about what we could do to re-energize what we have, an idea came to me." "A different idea?" Mike's heart began to race. "What idea?" he asked, trying to stay calm. Lisa took another deep breath and looked away for a moment, as if she needed to prepare herself for his reaction. "I've heard about couples who to break out of their routine try something out of the ordinary, something daring, and I thought maybe we could visit a swing club." Her words hung in the air like a bomb. Mike felt as if time had slowed down. He blinked, trying to process what he just heard. "A swing club?" he repeated, more to confirm that he had understood correctly than out of curiosity. Lisa nodded, then quickly added, "It's not that I'm saying we have to do anything, you know. It's more about exploring something different together, stepping out of the routine, seeing things from another perspective." Mike said nothing, feeling a mix of shock, curiosity, and confusion. He had never imagined Lisa might suggest something like that. As much as he wanted to support his wife, the idea had caught him completely off guard. The tension in the room grew even more tangible as he searched for words to respond. Lisa's suggestion echoed in Mike's mind like a bell that had just been struck and wouldn't stop vibrating. That night he could hardly sleep while rested beside him, apparently at peace after sharing her thoughts. Mike lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her words swirled in his head. "A swing club." It felt as if he had just stepped into completely unfamiliar territory, a place where the certainties he thought he had about their marriage were being challenged. In the days that followed, Mike tried to go about his routine as usual, but the idea seemed to follow him like a shadow. He couldn't help wondering what this meant to Lisa, and more than that, what it meant for their relationship. It wasn't just the suggestion itself, but what it represented. Was Lisa truly unhappy? Had he failed her at some point? without noticing, or maybe it was just passing curiosity. He wanted to believe it was something simple, but the hesitance and seriousness with which she'd spoken suggested something deeper. Mike started doing something he had never done before, researching. Late at night while Lisa was asleep, he opened his laptop and typed in keywords, feeling a bit ridiculous and uncomfortable about what he might find. He read articles, watched explanatory videos, and even found forums where people shared their experiences with this type of environment. Some stories were positive, others described conflicts and separations. He tried to filter the information with an open mind, but he couldn't help feeling a twinge of discomfort. After all, this wasn't just a theoretical decision, it was something his wife was considering for their marriage. The descriptions varied. Some said these places were spaces of freedom and connection where couples rediscovered their intimacy. Others warned of emotional risks, especially for those who weren't completely sure about their boundaries. Mike read accounts from men who, like him, had hesitated to enter that world. Some said the experience strengthened their marriages, while others admitted it revealed cracks that had previously been hidden. He wondered which category he and Lisa would fall into. More than anything, Mike found himself thinking about his own identity. He had always considered himself a practical, reserved man who valued stability above all else. He never imagined he would find himself dealing with such an idea, yet there was something in the way Lisa had spoken, something in her vulnerability that made him want to understand. He didn't want to dismiss her or minimize what she was feeling, but at the same time he couldn't deny the fear growing inside him, fear that this was more than he could handle. At work, he found himself distracted, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. His colleagues noticed, but he brushed off their questions with vague answers. It wasn't something he could share with anyone. This was an issue between him and Lisa, something that in a way isolated the two of them from the rest of the world, and at the same time it made Mike feel more alone than ever. One night, as he sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, he began to wonder about his own feelings. Was he curious at all about what Lisa had proposed, or was it just the fear of losing her that made him consider it? He knew that if he said no right away, it might seem like he was ignoring her needs, but saying yes without conviction wouldn't be fair to either of them. He was trapped in a dilemma that seemed to have no way out. Mike realized he needed to talk to Lisa again, but he was afraid to bring up the topic. What if he said something wrong? What if she misunderstood what he was feeling? He knew Lisa was his partner, someone he had always been able to count on, but somehow this moment felt different. Her suggestion had created an invisible distance between them, as if now there was a barrier they needed to cross together, yet neither knew quite how. That night, as he watched Lisa drift off to sleep, Mike felt crushed by a weight he didn't know how to carry. He loved her, he was sure of that, but for the first time he began to wonder if love and understanding were enough to overcome the complexities of two people who, despite being together, seemed to be starting to walk different paths. Mike knew he had to face the conversation, even though the idea still made him uncomfortable. He spent the whole day mentally rehearsing what he would say to Lisa, but when evening came, the words seemed to evaporate. The moment he walked in the door, Lisa was in the kitchen, finishing dinner, and the gentle sound of something simmering on the stove filled the air. She seemed calm, but Mike knew the subject was still hovering, waiting to be addressed. After a silent dinner where each bite seemed to increase the tension in Mike's chest, he finally took a deep breath and looked at Lisa. "We need to talk about what you said that night," He began trying to keep his tone steady. Lisa put down her utensils and looked at him attentively. Her eyes held a mix of apprehension and hope, as if prepared for either acceptance or rejection. Of course, she answered softly. Mike leaned forward, slightly resting his elbows on the table. I've been thinking a lot about it, about what you said about trying something new, something out of the ordinary. To be honest, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but at the same time, I don't want to dismiss what you're feeling or downplay your need to explore something different. He paused for a moment, studying her reaction before continuing. So I've decided that we can try it. I don't know how I'll feel, but I'm willing to go with you. Lisa's relief was almost palpable. She smiled, but it was a cautious smile, as if still measuring his words. Mike, I just want you to know this doesn't mean there's anything wrong between us. It's more about rediscovering ourselves together. He nodded, even though he still wasn't completely sure how this could help them. I understand, he said, though a small part of him doubted whether he truly did. On the chosen night, as they got ready to go out, Mike felt his anxiety growing inside him. He adjusted his tie in the mirror for the third time, trying to look confident, even though the idea of going to that place made him tense. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed calm and elegant in a black dress that highlighted her beauty. Her confidence was contagious, but it also made Mike feel more out of place. He wanted to rise to the occasion, but the doubt kept nagging at him. The drive to the place was marked by uneasy silence. The address Lisa had given led them to an upscale neighborhood with tree-lined streets and luxurious homes. When they parked in front of the indicated address, Mike was surprised to see how discreet and elegant the house was. There was no flashy sign or any indication of what went on inside. It was just a modern mansion with large windows and soft lights glowing warmly. They were greeted by a flawlessly dressed host who welcomed them with a subtle smile and guided them inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, Mike was impressed by the atmosphere. The interior of the house was sophisticated, with modern decor and an ambience exuding exclusivity. People were well dressed, speaking quietly while gentle music played in the background. It was nothing like the stereotypes Mike had in mind. It looked more like a luxury cocktail party than anything else. As they walked through the main hall, Lisa looked at him and squeezed his hand, offering a reassuring smile. Everything okay? She asked softly. Mike took a deep breath, letting his eyes wander around. Yes, he answered, though he wasn't entirely sure if he felt that way. And with that, the couple took their first steps into that unknown world together. The atmosphere inside the house was captivating, almost hypnotic. It was elegantly decorated with low lighting and soft music that created a relaxed yet expectant mood. Mike tried to appear at ease as he held a glass of wine they had offered upon arrival, but his mind was working fast, absorbing every detail around him. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed completely at home. She smiled and greeted people naturally, as if she already knew this world, while Mike tried not to seem out of place. Not long after they entered, another couple approached them. Alex and Rachel, both well dressed and charming, had easy smiles and a friendly presence that helped ease Mike's initial tension. Lisa began chatting with Rachel, exchanging compliments and light-hearted laughter, while Alex turned to Mike, talking about harmless topics to break the ice. Little by little, Mike felt a bit more comfortable, though still cautious. He noticed how Lisa seemed excited, laughing and gesturing as she spoke to Rachel, and felt a mix of relief and discomfort at seeing her so confident in a place that still felt completely unfamiliar to him. As the evening progressed, the conversation between the four of them deepened. Rachel mentioned how she and Alex had started coming to the club a few years earlier, describing how it had strengthened their relationship. Lisa listened attentively, her eyes sparkling with curiosity while Mike remained quiet, trying to process it all. When Rachel suggested they might experiment with something together, Mike's heart began to race. He looked at Lisa, waiting for some sign from her, and saw she was smiling. It was a different smile, full of expectation. The next moments were a blur. For Mike, they were led to a more private room where the mood seemed to change. The lighting was even softer, almost intimate, and the room exuded a palpable sensuality. Rachel and Alex approached Mike and Lisa with a natural ease that unsettled him, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world. Lisa looked at him with an encouraging smile, and before he could think of backing out, he felt Rachel touch his arm softly. Mike froze for a moment, his mind torn between curiosity and detachment from what was happening. As the minutes passed, Mike began to loosen up, mostly trying to keep up with Lisa rather than out of his own desire. Alex, with a confident manner, interacted with Lisa in a relaxed way, while Rachel did the same with him. The exchange happened almost naturally, but Mike could not stop watching Lisa. There was something about seeing her there in such an intimate situation with someone else that was both fascinating and unsettling. He felt like a spectator in his own life, a stranger at what should be a shared moment. At first, Mike tried to enjoy himself. He followed the pace, responded to Rachel's advances, and even managed to relax briefly. But everything changed when Lisa, breathing heavily, looked at him and said something he never expected. "Let's go to a private booth," she suggested, her tone more determined than he had ever heard. "I want you to come with me and other men too." Mike was stunned. He couldn't respond immediately. He just looked at Lisa, trying to understand where this need came from. It was as if he were seeing a version of her he never knew. Lisa didn't wait for a verbal answer. She took his hand firmly and began to lead him through the room while he followed, almost automatically, still processing what she had said. The booth was a more enclosed space, yet no less intense. Once inside, Mike saw that other men were already there waiting. Lisa seemed more excited than ever, as though this was the experience she truly wanted. For Mike, however, it started to feel surreal. He tried to tell himself it was all right, that this was just something he had agreed to do for her. But as the minutes passed, watching Lisa at the center of that situation began to affect him in unexpected ways. Seeing his wife there surrounded by other men changed something inside Mike. He couldn't explain what it was, but it was a feeling that mixed discomfort, frustration, and something he still couldn't name. The scene seemed to unfold in slow motion as he stood there, unable to move or fully understand what he was feeling. The booth was lit with a warm, soft glow, but to Mike it felt cold and oppressive. He tried to focus on Lisa, on her enthusiasm, but his eyes kept being drawn to the other men around her. It was a strange, almost alien feeling, as if he were watching a movie starring people he knew, but with all their roles reversed. He felt disconnected, as if he didn't belong in that moment. Lisa, on the other hand, was completely carried away by the experience, seeming revitalized by its seconds stretched into hours. Every move around Lisa seemed amplified. Every smile she gave another man felt like a needle pricking something inside Mike that he hadn't known was there. He had agreed to be there, had told himself it was an act of love and support for his wife, but now he wondered if this was breaking something that could never be fixed. Lisa turned to look at him at one point, her eyes shining with an intensity he didn't recognize. She held out her hand toward him, trying to include him, but he only shook his head slowly. I'm fine here, he murmured, his voice low and almost lost in the muffled environment. She hesitated for a moment, but soon went back to interacting with the others as if she didn't want to lose the momentum of the moment. Mike crossed his arms and leaned against one of the booth walls. His mind was a whirlwind. He tried to rationalize. I said I'd try. This is for her. It's just an experience. But no matter how many times he repeated these phrases like a mantra, they sounded more hollow each time. He started noticing details he hadn't before, the way the other men looked at Lisa, how easily she gave herself over to that environment. It wasn't exactly jealousy. He felt it was something deeper, a question of what all this meant for them as a couple. The air seemed heavier by the minute he looked around the booth, studying the other faces. For them this seemed natural routine, maybe even a bit of casual fun, but for Mike this felt like a cruel test, as if he were forced to watch something he didn't fully understand. He didn't know if he was an observer or a participant, and the ambiguity of that position left him paralyzed. Suddenly an unexpected thought crossed his mind. Is this really what Lisa wants? Did I ever really know her? He wondered. How many times he had assumed he knew what she felt or what she wanted without ever truly asking. Now here she was, living something that clearly made her happy, but for him it felt like the slow dismantling of everything they knew. The sounds around him began to bother him. Laughter, whispers, heavy breathing, all seemed louder as he fought to maintain his composure. Lisa didn't seem to notice his tension and wasn't sure if that bothered him more or less. Part of him wanted to leave, but another part couldn't move, as if he were trapped, not just physically but emotionally. Then he saw something that made his heart tighten. Lisa, at the center of it all, looked at another man with an intensity he'd never seen before. It wasn't planned or rehearsed, it was genuine, a look that said more than any words could. Mike turned his eyes away, but the image stayed in his mind. He knew at that moment that something had changed, maybe forever. The feeling of strangeness reached an unbearable point. The environment, which initially seemed sophisticated and intriguing, now felt small and suffocating. He tried to breathe deeply, but it felt like the air wouldn't enter his lungs. And while Lisa remained the center of everyone's attention, Mike stood still, frozen, questioning everything that had led him to that place. The next morning, after their visit to the club, a tense silence hung over breakfast. Lisa seemed full of energy, absently stirring her coffee cup with a light smile on her face. Mike, seated on the other side of the table, was lost in thought, his gaze fixed on a random point. The sound of Lisa's fork touching the plate echoed in the kitchen, seeming louder than it should. Neither of them spoke, but it was as if the air were filled with unspoken words. "It was interesting last night, wasn't it?" Lisa commented casually, trying to break the silence. Her voice was gentle, almost cheerful, but Mike felt her question land like a blow. He looked at her, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Yes, it was different," he said, his voice lower than usual. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't know how to express what he really felt. Lisa leaned forward slightly, holding her cup in both hands. "I felt like it was liberating, like we were finally stepping out of our routine, trying something new, rediscovering ourselves. Don't you think?" Mike hesitated. He knew he needed to be honest, but the words were stuck in his throat. "I think for you maybe it was like that, but for me it was complicated. I don't know. I'm still trying to understand how I feel about it all." Lisa frowned, her earlier enthusiasm fading slightly. She put her cup down and folded her arms, leaning closer. "Complicated? What do you mean? You seemed fine there." "I was trying to be fine," he admitted, putting his fork down with a soft metallic sound. I agreed because I thought it was important to you, but honestly, that's not something I'd want to repeat, La. It's not for me. The mood shifted. The light energy Lisa had brought with her began to dissipate, replaced by concern. She set the cup down and crossed her arms. Mike, I never wanted you to feel uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. I wanted something different, something to break us out of the rut. He took a deep breath, running his hands over his face as if to relieve the weight of the conversation. I understand, Lisa, and I tried to be there for you, but at the same time I felt like I was crossing a line I didn't know existed. Seeing you so comfortable, so connected to, that made me realize maybe our needs are different. Lisa remained silent for a moment, looking at him with eyes that showed a mix of guilt and frustration. Finally, she spoke, her voice lower and hesitant. I never meant to hurt you, Mikey, but to be honest, that experience made me realize there's something inside me I haven't explored yet, something I now feel I need to understand better. Her words sounded like a warning. Mike realized this wasn't just a passing curiosity for Lisa, it was something deeper, something pulling her away from him even if she didn't want to admit it fully. So what does this mean for us? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. Lisa didn't answer immediately. She lowered her gaze to the table, fiddling with the handle of her cup as if searching for courage. I don't know. I think we need to talk more about this. Understand if we're still on the same path. Mike, that sentence hung in the air like a verdict. In the weeks that followed, they tried to get back to their routine, but it was impossible to ignore the growing distance between them. Lisa seemed more animated, more alive, while Mike felt like he was slowly disappearing inside the marriage. Their interactions were polite but cold, as if both were trying to avoid a direct confrontation. They still shared the same house, but no longer the same emotional space. Every conversation became more superficial, every moment together more uncomfortable. Mike began to notice that even when they were in the same room, Lisa seemed to be somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't reach. And to make matters worse, he wondered if he should even try to reach her, or if it was time to let her go. The weeks turned into months, and the distance between Mike and Lisa became undeniable. What had once been a solid connection now felt like a stretched rope about to snap. Lisa, increasingly immersed in her search for self-discovery, started going out more often, saying she needed space to figure out who she was. Mike, for his part, tried to respect her wish, but each time she left, he was painfully reminded that they were drifting apart. One night, Lisa came home later than usual. Her face was lit by a mix of excitement and unease, as if she wanted to share something but knew the conversation would be difficult. Mike was in the living room, the TV on, though he wasn't paying attention when he saw her enter. He felt the now familiar tightness in his chest. Something was different than at night, and he knew he could no longer avoid a confrontation. Lisa sat down next to him, leaving more space between them than normal. She seemed to be searching for the right words, but at the same time, there was an urgency in her expression that kept her from stalling for too long. Mike, she began, her voice gentle but firm. I think it's time we were completely honest with each other. He turned to her, his eyes showing exhaustion and resignation. I'm listening, he replied, trying to remain calm though his heart was racing. Lisa took a deep breath before continuing. I love you, I always have, but after everything we've been through these last few months, I realized I'm in a different place now. That experience at the club, everything that followed, made me understand that I still have a lot to discover about myself, and that's not something I can do while we're stuck trying to return to what we once were. Her words hit him like a punch to the stomach. He knew this was coming, but hearing it out loud was like confirming a nightmare he'd been trying to avoid. So, what are you saying, Lisa? His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable tone of pain. Lisa took his hands, her eyes filled with tears. I'm saying that I think we need to separate, Mike, not because I don't love you, but because if we keep going like this, we're only going to hurt each other more. You deserve someone who shares the same desires, the same path, and I'm not that person anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Mike felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet, but at the same time a strange clarity emerged. He knew she was right as much as they tried. The gap between them had grown too large to ignore. He gently squeezed her hands and looked her straight in the eyes. I wish it were different, Lisa. I wish we could fix this, but if this is what you need to be happy, I won't stop you. Lisa began to cry, and Mike felt a knot in his throat, but he held back his tears. He knew he had to be strong in that moment, not for her but for himself. They embraced, a hug that seemed to carry all the love, pain, and goodbye that words could never express. The next morning, Lisa started packing her things. The process was calm, almost solemn. They spoke little, but not because there was anger or resentment. It was more as if both knew they had already said everything that needed to be said. When Lisa finally walked out the door carrying a suitcase and an expression of sadness mixed with hope, Mike stood in the hallway looking at the empty space she left behind. The house seemed strangely larger and quieter after Lisa was gone. In the following days, Mike tried to adjust, feeling her absence in every detail: the lingering scent of her perfume, the coffee cup she always used, even the sound of her footsteps through the house. But gradually he began to find a kind of peace. He knew that the separation was not the end of his life, but a forced new start, an opportunity to reconnect with himself. Lisa, for her part, also began her journey. She delved into new experiences, trying to understand who she was outside the marriage, while Mike, though struggling, began to rebuild his routine. And although the love they had shared remained a sweet and painful memory, both knew that the path to happiness required them to follow different roads. Thank you for watching the video.